the intro. Good morning, everybody. Welcome on in. We've got ourselves a good little show here. I got asked. Real simple question. Consultation. And if you want to ask me a question of your own, ask bullmuscle@gmail.com. Dear Bull Muscle, good morning. How are you doing? I wanted to ask you, what do you think of Donald Trump getting reelected? And moreover to the point, what do you think the impact it will be on your life in particular versus how it will impact America at large? Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So it looks like we are in for 4 more years of a Trump presidency. We have already seen what one might look like in the sense that he's been president before. What we don't really know, and I need to adjust my mic here. It's a bit low. That's better. What we don't know is how much variance there's going to be between the first presidency and this one. It seems to me, anyway, that there will be some amount of difference. I think he won with a lot more conviction this time. I think he's got the will of the public a bit more behind him than perhaps he did in his first election. I think, right, he didn't win the popular vote in 2016. The Electoral College is why Trump won the 2016 election. This time, I wouldn't quite call it a landslide, but it was a very solid victory. I think this was there's shades of Bush in 2004, that Bush got reelected 4 years into his presidency. Now, Trump's was non-consecutive, and the 2020 election had all sorts of weirdness around it. I'm not going there. I'm not really touching that one with a 10-foot pole. At this point, it's irrelevant, frankly. So, enough said about that. What do I think of Trump getting reelected? I think, in general, it is a sign that the average American is, by and large, a bit fed up with progressivism as a movement, at least at the moment. I think, in particular, men are very tired of what they felt the Biden administration and, more to the point, Kamala Harris had to offer. I think it was more of an indictment about that than it was about Trump. I don't think the number of hardcore Trump supporters in 2024 is any larger than it was in 2016. I think it's about the same proportion of the American population. But I think a lot of people who may have voted for Biden decided not to do so for Harris. So I think it's shifting a rightward shift. It's sending a rightward shift on the overall politics of this country. I think it seems like, maybe from a social perspective, I don't really care about social issues. From a social perspective, the Overton window, I guess, is starting to shift a bit back more to where it was maybe in the late 2000s or early 2010s. I think social progressivism, I think we reached a peak in terms of going further left around 2020, 2021, and we're seeing a bit of the pendulum swinging back now, which is pretty normal, right? We saw sort of a social swing towards more progressive ideas in the 1960s and early 1970s. And what followed were the Reagan years, which was a bit more of a return to the moral majority type crowd. So I think we're seeing a little bit of that. I personally think social issues are a tremendous waste of time, but that is what a lot of people vote on. I don't understand why, for the life of me. I think they're very much irrelevant compared to the economy, which the economy actually did pretty well under the Biden administration. So I don't think many people voted on the economy either. A lot of people voted about inflation, particularly. But the truth is, I don't think Trump is going to be any better on inflation than Biden was. The amount of inflation we got in 2022 and 2023 was not 100% on Joe Biden. Did he help? No, absolutely not. Oh, we can't hear you? Fuck. What do you mean y'all can't hear me? Y'all should be able to. What's going on here? Oh, there we go. When did my audio cut out? I guess I must have accidentally clicked to a different scene. Appreciate the heads up on that. When did it cut out? Shit. What are you gonna do? It must have been when I set the whiteboard down. I must have accidentally hit something on my keyboard, a hotkey or something, about a minute ago. Okay. So, economically speaking, I don't think a ton of people voted on the economy. Unemployment rates are as low as they have been since the 60s. I think people voted on inflation, but I don't. The trouble with voting based on inflation or voting for Trump is if you really cared about inflation as your top issue, you'd have voted for Chase Oliver. My rationale being that, right, the inflation that occurred in 2022 and 2023 was a multi-factored event. Was Biden's administration's spending a large part of it? Absolutely. And the fact that they decided to double down on that approach with a giant government spending bill named the Inflation Reduction Act, that's just going against basic economics 101. When you spend more money and put more money into the economy, you increase the velocity of money, and that's going to naturally increase inflation. However, going back and looking at what Trump did in his first term in office, he passed a tax cut. Tax cuts are inflationary because they work the same way that increased government spending does. He turned on the government spending taps in 2020 under the pandemic. So the idea that Trump is this vanguard against inflation, I think doesn't hold a lot of water. I think people are definitely upset about things like food prices having gone up substantially, but wages have also gone up the last few years. I don't think a lot of this was economic. I don't think the average American voted on economy. I really don't. Just because if they did, coming to the conclusion that Trump was the best option doesn't really hold water. Foreign policy, I think the foreign policy voter is a very small bracket of people. I would guess, I don't think there was a lot of difference, but I do think there are some people who saw the withdrawal from Afghanistan, saw continued aggression vis-a-vis Russia with Ukraine, and say the United States shouldn't be part of this. I think Trump did better here. I'm going to vote for him. I think there were a few people who did that. Other issues, there are, I think, people who got really sick of the Democratic Party just assuming they would vote for them. A good chunk of the black population, a good chunk of the Hispanic population. Trump won in higher numbers than I think any Republican has in decades. So my guess is that a lot of them were fed up with it. And the data pulls this out in terms of men in particular. The overall message from the Harris campaign seemed to be, men, you should vote for Kamala Harris because it'll help women, and you should help women, without acknowledging any of the actual issues men had. For instance, the male suicide rate, addressing divorce court, who gets custody of the children a lot of the time, why men are not going to education as much, falling male unemployment rate, falling male achievement. And I don't think a lot of the red pillars have that right either, but I do think there are a lot of young disaffected men, particularly black and Hispanic men, that said, okay, well, the Democrats haven't really done enough for me. I'm going to vote for Trump. What do I think it's going to mean for me in particular? Unfortunately, living here in Hawaii is going to hurt because Trump is an advocate of tariffs. And tariffs are, I'll do a pros and cons list. What do I think the benefits will be for me? What I think the drawbacks will be. Let's start off with the biggest con, and that's tariffs. Living in Hawaii in particular, right? A tariff is going to raise the cost of imported goods, right? The idea thereby being it brings jobs back to the United States. Unfortunately, in Hawaii, we deal with the fallout from the Jones Act. And the Jones Act states that any journey between an American port to an American port must be run by an American company with an American-built ship. It's protectionism. What that means is that the cost of transporting anything, goods, people, or otherwise, from the mainland to outer parts of the United States, like Hawaii, Alaska, Guam, Puerto Rico, is dramatically more expensive than if you allowed foreign companies to operate those routes, because it chokes a lot of the competition that can build and compete at cheaper rates. So the tariffs are, I think, going to be inflationary no matter where you live in the United States. I think here in Hawaii especially, they are going to hurt. Any goods that we import from the mainland, we're going to see an increase in costs. So that is going to damage costs of living here, which for me, because I consume very little, I'm relatively minimalistic, I'll be okay. But it's definitely not a positive. Pros for me. Taxes. I don't make a lot of money, I make a decent amount of money, but I currently don't pay that much in taxes because I've gotten very good at tax advantaging a lot of my income. I think under a Trump administration, taxes are probably going to stay pretty low. So, all right, well, that's nice. I don't have to pay as much in taxes. Whoopee. That would be a pro. A couple other pros and cons. We're not talking about altogether. We're just talking about how it applies to my life, because that's the question a viewer has asked here. Couple other pros. Freedom of speech. I know that sounds, a lot of people say, oh no, Trump's not for freedom of speech. He's not, but he's more for it than Biden or Harris were. I think because Trump won so much, you're even seeing a lot of progressive voices finally say, oh shit, we might have gone too far here. We tried to cancel too many people. We need to dial it the fuck back on what we try to do, culturally speaking. I think a lot of the voices around cancel culture are going to be toned down over the next 4 years. I don't think you're going to see the same kind of 2016 era resistance or 2017 era resistance that you saw this time around. I think a lot of Americans, and I think this is one of the big reasons Trump won, is that a lot of Americans are fucking fed up with that kind of attitude from the left. The HR, you can't say that, we're going to cancel you people. While they are a minority of the left wing, they are so toxic that I think a lot of people said, we're sending you a message here. We're tired of that. And a lot of it's not any one particular movement, but I think a lot of that came from men in particular, especially men that are tired of having to walk on eggshells around women now. Men that are tired of being told you can't have a relationship in the office because it's problematic. These are, office relationships have been a thing for decades. Are there power imbalances? Yes. Does that mean you need to ban them all? No. And there are people who say, it should always just be a problem. Like, it's just, no, you need nuance and context. It's the same thing as the people who say believe all women. And yes, those people do exist. They are out there and I have met them. No, you can't do that. Believe all women doesn't work when we have innocent until proven guilty as the legal standard in this country. It's why this Mangione fellow, the guy who off the healthcare CEO, is going through the judicial process. Did he do it? Of fucking course he did. He had the smoking gun. He was ranting about healthcare CEOs when they arrested him. The guy whacked him. Right. But we still have to go through the legal system because that's how due process works. That's the standard in this country. Other things for me. That's what I'm writing both in pros and cons. Let's talk about Doge, okay? Doge is the poorly named Department of Government Efficiency, which is being set up as a task force headed by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. Why did I put this in both pros and cons? The pros is that, and I have seen them, there are a ton of federal jobs and federal workers who don't do shit and could very easily be either automated or just straight up fired, the way Elon kicked out a ton of people at Twitter who weren't doing shit. Now, on the con side of that, right, in my industry, there are also a lot of people who may see Doge, a lot of competent people who maybe decide they really like teleworking. And obviously teleworking federally, that's going to go away. I don't get that anyway as a perk, but that means a lot of federal workers who maybe do get that I interact with on a daily or weekly basis at my job, they might decide, nope, fuck you, I'm out, I quit. That was one of the main things my HRSA training was working with, contact matters and don't be creepy. No. We're stopping right there. Don't be creepy. No. Because creepy is just the word women use for when a guy they don't like does a thing. That's the problem. It's that meme, right? If the hot guy says X, the woman likes it. If the ugly guy says X, it's creepy and problematic. That's the double standard that men don't like because it's walking on eggshells. You don't know where you stand. It's not a consistent standard. And the response to that from the HR side of things is, well, just cancel it all and ban it all. And well, you do that, that makes everybody, that's so toxic. It doesn't work. Right. There's a fine line there. Yes, there are men who do not know how to fucking approach a woman, and do it poorly. But right, if it's a one-off kind of thing, fucking let it slide. Don't turn it into a federal case. Exactly. Creepy is such a terrible word to use there. It's, again, if you get called a creep, you may have done something, you may have actually done something that most people would consider socially unacceptable, or you may have done something that would have been acceptable if you were hot, but since you're not, now you're a creep. Now it's a problem. There's a lot of that double standard going on, and women don't like to admit it, but there are several women who will admit it. And that one, I do pin on the fairer sex. I don't think men really employ that double standard the same way women do. We benefit from, our gender benefits from plenty of double standards. That's not one of them. If you're hot, yeah, you can get away with a lot more in terms of talking to women. A lot more lines, I'll say, work. That's the thing. Training's about having healthy relationships in general. I mean, yeah, right. And you can say, oh, you shouldn't go and try and make connections at work, but you may find, right, the dirty little secret is that the dating apps are fucking atrocious. And the more and more you want to eliminate avenues for men to talk to women in real life, the more you force them onto those horrendous dating apps. And that makes nobody happy, including women. Right, it's now it's socially unacceptable to approach a girl at the gym, approach a girl at work. And okay, you say, okay, well, what about bars and clubs? Some of us don't drink. Some of us like to talk to someone where we can actually hear what they say, as opposed to, trying to get a conversation with a girl going when there's 100 decibels of, EDM or rap music blaring in the background, as is the case in a lot of clubs and bars. As long as you aren't in a position of power over your significant other, dating is fine in the office. Usually, that used to be the standard. Over the past 10 years or so, it started to become any relationship in the office is a problem. Even if it's among equals, even if, the power level's not the same, but, she's not working for you, whatever. It'd be a bit tricky depending on what the office culture is. I think in general, HR and women in particular kind of went a little bit too far with the Me Too cancel. You know, the whole social media viral trend that went with what was it? Would you rather see a man or a bear in the woods? And all the women were saying a bear. That's what you would call a turning point. That's where men are going to say, "Oh, uh-huh." And you're telling me Harris is the party that's going to talk about women's issues a lot, huh? Interesting. I guess I'll vote for Trump. I just full disclaimer here. I did not vote for Donald Trump. I also did not vote for Kamala Harris. I voted third party. But a couple other things in particular for me we're going to talk about here. Really, the other ones is cons. I don't think he's any more war prone or less war prone than Biden was. I think that's a little bit hard to say. Obviously, if we go to war, given the nature of what I do, that affects me quite a bit. So I can't really put that in either pros or cons, but it's worth mentioning. Cons. Oh, I am a union worker. So here you go. This is why I'm paradox. I value my labor union, and I know the Trump administration is going to be very hostile to organized labor. As someone who believes I am a strong and ardent capitalist, but I strongly believe that we should allow for organized labor. Labor unions are an integral part of an effective capitalist market because they allow for, realistically, the same level of cooperation that corporations employ. And if you really want to sit here and argue and say companies never collude with each other, come on. You should allow labor about the same level of freedom to do that you allow corporations. There you go. You want proof that I'm a little bit more nuanced than I'm not on team red or team blue. I've got a little bit more going on under the hood. Now, if we go to war, if we are attacked again, they won't have to draft me. I'm signing up. This country has been very, very good to me, and I will, if the time comes, serve in whatever capacity Uncle Sam needs me to. This is the greatest country on earth. That's another one that I would give as a pro to Trump. A lot of the modern progressive movement hates America. They do. I'm sorry. Look, these are the people who want to side with Hamas a lot of the time. These are the people who really, they view everything in an us versus them mindset. And there are plenty of people on the right who do this as well, and we'll get to them. The people on the left do this. They view this as an us versus them or oppressed versus oppressor mindset. And America is always seen as the oppressor, always the evildoer, which is just, it's, really, you're siding with countries like China, Iran, Hamas, which is not really a country, but you're siding with Palestine, which you'll say, oh, Palestine isn't equal to Hamas. Okay, that's as may be, but it's what, 65-70% of people in Palestine ardently support what Hamas stands for. It's like the Queers for Palestine people. That is a functionally incoherent movement. It's unserious is what it is. And speaking of the people on the right, and I've seen them again, I moved here from rural South Carolina. I've lived in MAGA country. It's the same people who think, Trump's going to magically fix shit overnight. It just, no. Couple other cons. Food prices in particular, okay? This is related to immigration policy. You might not like it. It is a rather inconvenient truth that ain't no legal U.S. citizens going out to the fields in California and picking strawberries or, picking almonds or whatever, doing basic agricultural work. If you like cheap produce, you have to tolerate a certain amount of illegal immigration. That's a very inconvenient fact, but it's Trump's going to get rid of that, or at least he's going to claim to. And if he does, or the deportation as an example, if you deport a lot of that migrant labor, if you like reasonable construction or labor costs for building stuff. Who's up there fixing the roof on your house? 90% of the time, it's usually a crew of Latin American workers some of whom are here illegally. You might not like that fact, but that doesn't really change it. So it's the same thing with, again, you want the cost of produce to stay low, you need to tolerate a certain amount of illegal immigration. I have a feeling the state of California in particular is going to do as much as it can to stonewall the Trump administration, but I don't know how effective the state of California will be on that one. So this is sort of where I would go with it. These are just for me in particular. I don't think... Oh, cons. One more. Yeah, Trump's not exactly a huge fan of alternatives to driving for anything. And I'm not the person who's like public transit for everything, but man, some good bike infrastructure, especially around here, is sorely needed. And I think for every dollar you put in to invest in cycling infrastructure, you get a massive return. We're not going to see a lot of that over the next 4 years, which is unfortunate. Hopefully different cities decide to do it anyway because it's the best use of their tax dollars. But the city of Honolulu, I'd be best not holding my breath on that one because this city is run by idiots. No, I'm not very happy with Honolulu County's government. I think they're now the newest thing is installing speed cameras like they have in a lot of European countries. That's not actually going to make anything safer for anyone. All it's going to do, it's just a form of all you're trying to do is get cheaper highwaymen at that point. All you're doing is you're just making more speed traps. That's all you're doing. You're trying to raise revenue. Don't fucking kid yourself about what that is. The boys on Top Gear talked about that when speed cameras were introduced in Britain in the 2000s. It doesn't make anything safer. All it does is provide another revenue stream for the government. And as someone who doesn't drive a car, it shouldn't affect me, but that doesn't mean I support it. I still think that's dumb. He also thinks we have infinite oil reserves that we can drill. Frankly, we don't have infinite oil reserves that we can drill, but we have so much oil that, in terms of oil production, right, we're at an all-time high under a Democratic president, I might add. The truth with oil and gas production is that the United States, it's a consumption problem. It doesn't matter who's in charge of the government. Nobody on the left has the balls to tax gasoline the way they should. The last president to raise taxes on gasoline was Bill Clinton in 1993, and that's because Bill Clinton was the last fiscally responsible president we've had. I actually, for all of his moral qualms, I actually really appreciated the Clinton administration in terms of how relatively moderate they ran things. Don't look now, but like you go back to the 90s and all of a sudden you see, so you're telling me we had very low unemployment rates, we had a booming economy, and we were basically running the government at a close to a balanced budget, especially compared to today's money, right? Yes, is the unemployment rate great under the Biden administration? Sure, but how much of that is fueled by deficit spending? So, all right, so this is, for me, there's some pros, there's some cons. What do I particularly think of Trump? I don't think he was an above average president in his first term. I doubt he will be in his second term. But I don't think he's the second coming of Mussolini either. In general, I would say there's some good, there's some bad. I would lean a little bit more bad than good. I wouldn't vote for him, but I understand why a lot of people did. At least I think so. I've already discussed that earlier in this video. Let's go ahead and say what I think is going to be the impact of a second Trump administration on the greater economy at large. So we're going to write that out again, pros and cons. The first one and the most important one is deficits, okay? Now, hopefully Doge ends up becoming more than just a meme led by Elon and Vivek, and we actually see some spending cuts from that. But Trump has already said he's not touching Social Security, he's not touching Medicare, and he's not touching the military. Unfortunately, those three things are the largest budget items we have. You could cut the rest of the federal budget in essence, and you'd still be running a deficit. Without touching those three items, we're kind of, that's not going to work. And no, tariffs will not make up the deficit. You can, right, you could cut welfare entirely, 100%. But until you talk about Social Security and Medicare, you're not making the progress you need to. No person running for office, with the exception of Chase Oliver, which is why he got my vote, talked about raising the Social Security age. That's what needs to happen. Nobody likes hearing that, but that's economic reality. It's a math problem, right? When Social Security was created in the 1930s, the eligibility age was 62, right? Life expectancy was 59 back then on average. So that means there was a 3-year gap in favor of Social Security in terms of who was paying in and who was taking out. Now the eligibility age is 66. Unfortunately, well, I should say, fortunately, life expectancy has risen to 79. But instead of there being a +3, now it's a -13. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that's not a sustainable system, especially as America's population continues to age. And under Trump, that problem will get worse because who has higher fertility rates and therefore more babies and therefore keeps the population younger than average? Immigrants. Immigrants tend to have more children than people born here. Race is irrelevant on this one too. In particular, right, the stereotype is that the Mexican families tend to be very large, they're Catholic and all that. No, it's more that the immigrant families tend to be large. After a couple of generations, for instance, Mexican immigrants to the United States tend to have fertility rates very close to the US average. I think it's by the time the third generation is here, it's more or less become within one standard deviation of average. So deficits. I would love to see Vivek and Elon prove me wrong with Doge here. I don't think they will. But that is a pro, actually. Doge is in general a pro. There are a lot of burdensome, excessive, and unnecessary regulations in CFR that we could get rid of. That Elon he's straight up crowdsourcing that. I think that's a great idea. At least getting some conversations going about what we want to deregulate and why we want to deregulate it. I think that's a good idea. There's plenty of fat and red tape to be cut. There are plenty of useless government workers that we could get rid of. I know that because, frankly, I see them every day at my job. One of the leaders on the world stage I have a lot of respect for is Javier Milei in Argentina, and people are calling him far right. He's not. Okay, first off, Javier Milei and Donald Trump are nowhere near the same in terms of how they want to operate their government. I personally have a lot more respect for Javier Milei. I think he's a lot more internally consistent, and he has a plan and he's sticking to it. And he had the balls to say to the Argentine people, "This is going to hurt. We have backed ourselves into a corner," which Argentina did. Argentina mismanaged their economy for the better part of an entire century, from the early 1900s all the way until the present day. And Javier Milei said, okay, well, the reason we have this hyperinflation, the reason we have a lot of brain drain, we have a lot of shit leaving the country, is that we're spending more money than we're taking in. We're subsidizing way too much shit, subsidized energy, subsidized oil prices, and it's not sustainable. We've created bureaus and there's the Department of Women's Issues or something like that, or the Department of Culture and the Ministry of Culture in Argentina, the Ministry of Women's Issues, and he rips it off. Afuera. Yeah, that's the kind of attitude you need to take when you've got an inflation rate of 200% per year. Now, thankfully, we are nowhere near the dire economic straits that Argentina has been going through. But that kind of willingness to really cut and cut deep like that, I think Trump talks a big game and his actions will go very, very little. Congress will stifle him a bit, but the fact that Trump hasn't even, again, Trump has already ruled out touching Social Security and Medicare. It tells me all that I need to know. He's not serious. I still am in favor of spending cuts in the government. Hell, I could make the case that I needn't be employed at my current job, frankly. Or at least you could cut some people in my department. You could make the argument for my not needing to be employed at my current job. I'll admit that much. Fucking do it. The difference is I'm financially independent. It doesn't matter to me. But other things, what I think it will mean for the country. I think foreign policy in general, not entirely, but I think Trump is going to be stronger than Biden. Biden has been seen as a rather weak leader. He's supported Ukraine a lot, which has been great for the Ukrainian government, but we can't continue to spend $80 billion a year financing Ukraine to do this. That's speaking of things that contribute to inflation. War is incredibly inflationary, and yes, the war in Ukraine, right? The Democrats are the ones saying the war in Ukraine is causing a large part of the most recent inflation. Well, if you're supporting the war in Ukraine, then you're supporting higher inflation. That's kind of, those two are linked. So while I don't want to Neville Chamberlain the fuck out of this, because that's just going to encourage Putin to take more in the future, I do think the best possible outcome is that Ukraine, if Ukraine can get into the EU and NATO, even if they lose land, it's better for them in the long run. I think you're best off having that. More to the point, and this is my biggest reason to put a plus for Trump in foreign policy. Trump is the only one that really has held the rest of NATO's feet to the fire in terms of getting their defense spending to an appropriate level. It took Russia invading Ukraine for the European countries to really do it, but Trump was the one calling them out on that 6 years ago. Hell, Trump called out the Germans for over-reliance on Russian natural gas for their energy supply in 2018, and the Germans laughed at him. Yeah, Trump got proven right there, didn't he? Again, not a fan of everything he does on that front. But let's take a look at Israel. Well, all right, Biden continued to fund Israel. I frankly, as far as Israel is concerned, Israel is more than capable of handling their business themselves. When it comes to Israel versus Hamas, I'm on Team Lockheed Martin, okay? I really don't like either side. As someone who feels very strongly about the protection of LGBT rights, I cannot in good consciousness support Hamas or Palestine because they throw gay people off of towers and throw rocks at gay people. I mean, that's fucking caveman behavior, all right? That's not a tolerant religion. That's not a religion of peace. It isn't. It just fucking isn't. Israel is not perfect on LGBT rights either, but in general, Israel treats gay people like they're human beings, and so that's a step up, right? That's not enough for me to support a, frankly, obstinate and actively making things worse Netanyahu regime. I think Netanyahu's got to go for there to be a solution. The trouble is that I don't think Israel thinks of winning the peace. It's the same way that my biggest things about Ukraine are it's gotta get them into the EU for economic security and economic prosperity, and get them into NATO for physical security and prosperity, because that's winning the peace. That's giving Ukraine a positive path forward. You cannot continue, right? If things go back to the status quo before October 7th of last year, it's just a matter of time until another October 7th event happens, right? You can't, if you want to kick every single Arab or Palestinian out of the West Bank and out of Gaza, what's that going to solve? All that's going to do is piss off the rest of the Middle East against you even more. You have to come up with a permanent solution. And the biggest one is, this I will give credit to the Biden administration. They floated this out there at least. You have to give people in Palestine an economic alternative to terrorism. Right, Palestine's got a birth rate of like 6. Palestine has a super young population. These are young teenagers born in an Islamic country being fed a shit ton of propaganda and being up against an aggressive Israeli government. Yeah, they're probably going to be prone to become terrorists if they have no better economic alternatives. Under the Biden administration, there was a plan to try and get the UAE and Bahrain, I think, and a couple other Middle Eastern oil countries to try and rebuild Gaza's economy, rebuild the West Bank's economy, to give an alternative for economic prosperity. Again, that's winning the peace. You have to find a way to win the peace. I don't think I think Israel probably, there are people in Israel who think that way, but I definitely don't think Netanyahu thinks that way. That being said, I don't think the Biden administration was ever going to get very far on that one. I think because Trump is seen as a bit more of madman theory, I think both sides, both Israel and Palestine, are willing to come to the table, right? Because you're not going to see, like with Biden, you had the moderates who are super pro-Israel, threaten to withhold congressional support if Biden didn't do X or Y. With Trump, right, the people that support Israel in the United States tend to support Trump really hard. Like the hardcore Trump supporters will support Trump no matter what Trump says about Israel. So he's got insulation against that political pressure, which means I think he's going to be able to do a little bit more there. The other one is China will probably be less aggressive with a Trump presidency. I don't think China is going to try and push the envelope as much. That being said, 2027 is the 100th year anniversary of the PLA, and would not surprise me if they try to do something stupid with Taiwan then. Would not. I think China is smarter than that in general. I think even Xi Jinping realizes that's a bridge too far, but the Chinese love their saber rattling. I think they'll do less of it under Trump than they have under Biden, because they've done a lot of saber rattling. Holy shit. Okay, so that's pros, cons. Economy. While I do think deregulation will help, the tax cuts are going. I think he's going to try and make the Trump tax cuts permanent. That's an inflationary matter. While that helps me as someone who makes a decent income, I don't need to be paying less in taxes. I pay quite a bit, but relative to my income, like it's for the amount of government spending we all collectively as a society seem to want. You got to pay more taxes to get to that point. So that one, I don't think the economy is going to be better under Trump than it has been under Biden. I don't. Unemployment rate really can't go down any further. Inflation has come back down, but I think a lot of the good economic news that came under the Biden administration and under the previous Trump and to a lesser extent Obama administrations has kind of been a mirage under the veil of deficit spending, right? It's very easy when you're spending, $1 trillion in deficit every year. It's very easy to stimulate the economy to increase the amount of jobs, but that's not fiscally sustainable. That's not wise. So economy, I also think we're due for a stock market correction, and Trump may try to postpone that, which is not a good idea because that will spur a bubble. And when bubbles pop, the bigger the bubble gets, the more painful it generally is. So you don't want to do that. If a recession occurs under your presidency, that doesn't mean you're a bad president. But there've got to be external factors and reasons for it. Now, for instance, do I think George W. Bush was a good president, even though there was a recession under his? But no, absolutely not. Bush was probably the worst president we've had in the last 75, 80 years. Far worse than Trump, by the way. And before you come at me with, well, how Iraq? No, that's it. Iraq. That is the biggest foreign policy blunder the United States has seen in the last probably at least since Vietnam. Arguably, it was worse than Vietnam in terms of that. Otherwise, cons for USA, pros. Immigration for me, I think I put it. it's kind of, there's a little bit of both. On one hand, yeah, we need to respect U.S. rule of law again. Just because the U.S. legal immigration system is broken doesn't make illegally entering our country okay. That being said, we need to fix our legal immigration system, which I don't think Trump is very keen to do. So, that one's kind of a wash. Cons, we're going to talk about urbanism, right? Urbanism. We are seeing a return to cities that hasn't been seen. Well, we saw a return to cities before the pandemic. We're going to continue seeing that. Even though teleworking is putting a lot more interest in suburbs, the fact that prices in cities continue to rise, especially in walkable neighborhoods near the cities, would be an indicator that Americans in general do want walkable, bikeable infrastructure to get around, and they do not all of them anyway, want to just have to make everything car dependent. The Trump administration has no interest in urbanism. The Trump administration wants more single family exclusive zoning, and that's going to jack up housing prices, which is not good for anyone. So that's definitely a con on that one. There are a couple other pros and cons. I would say social values, the Trump administration's a pro, just because we're never going to see gay marriage get repealed. But a lot of the real wacko shit that the progressives like to squeal about and have been for the last 4 years, they're going to have to shut the fuck up for the next 4 years, which will be nice. It'll be blissful. You're going to see a lot less. I think you're going to see a lot less of the grifts, the bullshit like BLM, right? Like Black Lives Matter was meant to be, a great movement for talking about real and necessary needed police reform. And then you go and you see the leaders of Black Lives Matter were buying fucking property in Los Angeles, and basically they were using it to launder and embezzle money from, which is pretty fucking scandalous. You're using the death of the death of people who have been treated poorly by the cops to grift out of. That's despicable. You'll see plenty of right-wing grifts, but you'd see those no matter who was in office. Don't even get on those charlatans. That's the perfect word for it. It is charlatanism. You know what, actually? Speaking of pros and cons, I'm going to put RFK in both categories. Because that guy is a whack job, but he's also, for a 70-something-year-old, dude's fucking jacked. He's kept very good care of his body. And I think there is a lot to be said for getting rid of processed crap that Americans buy. Unfortunately, what he should be talking about is a tax on junk food, and I don't think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see more bans and regulations. RFK is also against GMOs. Unfortunately, without GMOs, most of the world's population would have starved in the 1970s, so we're beyond the point of making everything GMO free. We can't unscramble that egg. That egg was scrambled and cooked 50 years ago, so to speak. So I do think this is what bothers me about the urbanism part so much. Why is cycling, the stereotype of cycling and urbanism, so associated with left-wing soy boys in this country? You would think that the right wing in this country, the people who, right, there's been a lot of, you see, I've seen fucking articles over the past year written by progressives talking about how lifting weights is a gateway to right-wing extremism and other kinds of crap like that. You would think, right, that cycling as a way to get around that requires minimal government spending for infrastructure, minimal licensing, minimal registration, and allows for maximum freedom would be the ultimate right-wing cause. And yet, the right wants subsidized roads and subsidized oil for bigger and bigger and dumber trucks that make people fat. So that one is the biggest head scratcher to me. I've never understood that one. I still have never gotten a good answer on it. Why urbanism and cycling is so heavily associated in the U.S. with left-wing policy. Because there are countries, take the Netherlands for instance, cycling is neither a left nor a right wing policy. It's simply cycling, as it should be. We should all want to get in shape. We should not have that problem. New looking for the plantation I was supposed to end up on if Trump won, according to these freaks. Hold up, are you black? If you don't mind me asking there, Keon, are you black? I'm assuming that's the joke you're making there. Out here, it could mean you were any race, because basically all the races around here, with the exception of white people, were working as field hands on the plantations until about the 50s when tourism started to take that over. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. Full disclosure, there were, when I lived in rural Texas in 2020, during that election, there were plenty of Trump supporters with, good old boy ding 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 Confederate flags, which, yeah, that's maybe we're getting a little bit towards plantation style. But in general, no. That's just the farthest right idiots. They're every bit as stupid as the farthest left idiots. But in general, so there you go. To answer your question, let's see. What do I think of? I'll summarize. I already talked about what Trump an impact of a Trump presidency for me, the impact of the Trump presidency for the country. I think you're not going to see a ton of change economically. Not really. Trump and Biden are actually very similar economically. It's just they're both big spending, big deficit politicians. It's just what they want to spend the money on is different. One wants to spend it on shit tons of foreign aid. One wants to spend it on right-wing pet projects and building a wall that's not really going to do anything. Do I even think the wall will happen? Well, it didn't on the first term. So it's anyone's guess, really. But I would say meh. So in general, there you go. There's my opinion. What to take away from this? What do I think of Trump? In short, what do I think of Donald Trump? I think he's going to be a below average president this term in the same way that he was last term. He's not literally Hitler. He's not the savior of the world or the second coming of Christ. He's a multi-billionaire businessman who has successfully run for office twice out of 3 times now. There you go. I didn't vote for him, and he can't run for another term. But frankly, that's the other thing I want to talk about. I don't think Donald Trump is going to live to see 2029. That's not because I think he'll get assassinated. It's because he's a 78-year-old fat ass who lives off of KFC, McDonald's, and Diet Coke. Unless he changes his diet, that is going to catch up with him. The man's already spent 4 years in the most stressful job in the world. They say 4 years of the presidency ages you like 10 years. Go look at Obama. And you can even see it. Like, you look at him in the Joe Rogan podcast, you can see it's a little hoarseness in his voice. The wrinkles are a little bit deeper. He's in his upper 70s. Donald Trump in 2024 is as old as Joe Biden was in 2020. And Joe Biden was too old in 2020, frankly. I voted for Biden in 2020. Full disclosure, and I regret it. Frankly, there were no good options in 2020. Joe Jorgensen was horrific. I don't like Trump. I don't like Trump enough to vote for him. I didn't like. I definitely, the Greens are fucking off their rockers. I thought Biden was going to run this country in a much more moderate way than he did. I thought it was going to be a little bit more. I thought a Biden administration was going to be a little bit closer to the way Bill Clinton ran the country in the 90s, and that didn't happen. So, frankly, there's also a shit ton of corruption with both Trump and Biden are extremely corrupt. But Trump just pardoned his own son. Shouldn't have done that. Biden pardoned his own son. Shouldn't have done that. He pardoned the amount of people Biden pardoned recently, and some of them, like one was, I want to say like a child, like a pedo, child sex offender. Ugh. That's pretty despicable. So I really, again, I voted for Chase Oliver in 2024. Not that I even supported everything he said that much, but he was the best of the options available. I don't think Trump will survive his term. I'm frankly quite amazed Biden survived his term, although I think over the last 2 years, Harris has been running the scene and not very well. I don't. It just listen to Joe Biden talk. That's all you have to do. They're both too old for the job. It's the world's most stressful job. You shouldn't be. I personally, I would love to see an age limit on the presidency. You should not be gunning for the office of president if you are over the age of 70. There's just too much to be done. It is too consequential a position, and the odds of death are too high at that point. That's just my opinion. And we can disagree on that. But there you go. So that more or less covers it. I'm optimistic, though. I think regardless of who's in office, this is still the greatest country on earth. We still have an incredibly dynamic market. We have a lot of new tech coming out and coming up in the next few years that could change the world. We'll see what happens. There are a lot of positive signs. We talk about like greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, United States oil consumption hasn't fallen as much as it should have, but we are still seeing a lot. This would have been a con. I should have written on this. Green energy. We saw a lot more of it deployed over the last 4 years, thanks to the Biden administration. Whether or not that was worthwhile government spending, I will leave up to the audience. I can make a case for some of it. I can also say a lot of it was wasteful. There's probably truth in both. Nuclear energy, I would love to see more of, but frankly, that's one where I'm really hoping CFR starts getting. If Elon and Vivek could take a hatchet to CFR for a lot of nuclear work, that would be incredible. That would really make me happy. But I'm not going to hold my breath over it. I think a lot of the regulations they'll target are ones that make their own pet businesses and projects easier. Make SpaceX or Boring Company or whatever the fuck Vivek is investing in these days easier. That's what I'm guessing. Anyway, that is more or less all I got for y'all today. I do have another consultation on the books. Maybe I'll do it today. It's going to require a little bit more effort, so I charge this person a bit more. Maybe I'll do it today. Maybe I'll wait till tomorrow. It's going to be fitness related, so we'll do that. See if we got any other comments or chats that I didn't address. War would be an interesting time for that. Yeah. I obviously wish we avoid war. War is also highly inflationary, as we've said. So I think there's enough money at stake to avoid a major war between the United States and China. That's the war we're talking about here. If China does something with Taiwan, what do we do in response? I think with a Trump presidency, I don't think China tests the waters. We'll see. Again, I could see a scenario in which Trump dies due to health problems or is incapacitated due to health problems around the 2027 point. Chinese hits that. It's August 1st, 2027 is the 100th year anniversary of the PLA. That's the People's Liberation Army, by the way. This is the Red China's army. And you can see them try to reunite the country, which means take Taiwan in August of 2027. I don't know whether or not it'll happen, but I could see it. I could see China getting more aggressive if, let's say, Trump were incapacitated or dead and Vance was the president, because I don't think they'd have the same level of respect for him. I do not think very much of J.D. Vance. I was really hoping Trump picked someone else for his vice president, because I think that was more consequential. I didn't mind Tim Walz as a VP pick, but I don't think the Harris campaign used him very well. Harris did not run a good presidential campaign. I think Harris was set up to fail because Biden didn't drop out until way too late. But that is that's my conjecture anyway. The fact that the Democrats didn't even have a primary this time is kind of telling about, right? They were running a campaign based on protecting democracy, and then they didn't have a democratic process for nominating a candidate. So, not a very good political strategy there, I don't think. Anyway, that's going to be it for me today. I was originally planning on going out to Cayena Point today, but my ride for that fell through. It's like a 40-mile bike ride out there, which I don't really feel like doing today. I don't have the energy for it. So, gonna try and figure out what else I'm gonna do with my day now, because it's free and none of my homeboys who said they wanted to hang out this weekend have come through. So maybe I'll just go hike on my own. Just kind of fuck off or go hit the beach today. Beaches or hiking, really, that's what I do with my weekends. It's a good time. Anyway, regardless of what Trump does or what happens over the next 4 years, the truth of the matter is, you, me, and everyone else, the world, our destiny is in our hands. If we bust ass, if we make the good decisions that we need to, right? Make good decisions. They form your actions. Actions form habits. Habits form values, and so on. You do that, the success will come. It's not always the way you expect to find it, and it's not always the easiest, but bust ass and the results do come. Anyway, do we have anything else in chat? Nope, looks like that's going to be it then. All right, I am out for today. Well, failing that, maybe I'll chill in the VC later on my Discord. As far as lifting streams are concerned, I wanted to talk about this. I was thinking it a bit more too. I think I'm more or less done the lifting streams. I'm tired of the technical difficulties, and I don't feel like I'm getting as good of a lift in. So we're probably going to curtail those. Still have plenty of content for y'all, but that's more or less going to be it on those. I don't think I'm just not enjoying them as much as I used to as well. The magic's gone. So, yep, that's going to be it for me today, y'all. Shoots. See you around. Take care.